Hello and welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 12th of September 2025. It has been in many ways, I think, Sarah, for people who listen to this podcast, people who share our worldview, one of the worst weeks of the year. And we're going to spend, I don't know how long on the podcast, maybe the whole podcast, maybe just the first half, talking about the events in Colorado yesterday, or was it Utah yesterday, where Charlie Kirk, the conservative influencer, lost his life at the hands of an assassin. If we have time, we'll talk about some of the other stories in the news, or touch on the presidential election, in which there's been a significant development just before you recorded this podcast on Thursday evening. And we might talk about a criminal case involving the murder of a young Ukrainian woman in Georgia, also in the United States. It seems to have captured a lot of global attention this week. But we'll begin as ever by asking Sarah how she is.
Not great. Pretty shit, actually, John.
Yeah, I talked to you this morning.
Poor John. I was weeping on the phone to John this morning. I don't mind. You can say it. I was very upset this morning.
Yeah, you were.
I was very, very upset. I was here in the house on my own last night. Keith was out, and it was such a weird. I'm sure. I don't know. You'd really wonder about whether kids can feel something. My kids were all gone to bed. They're asleep. This news broke. I was on my own in the house, so I start watching it. I see this video of Charlie getting shot in the neck. I'm sorry I watched it. The way you kind of watch something before you even realise what you've watched. And it was kind of obvious to me that it was an injury that was unlikely to be survivable. And then obviously it became obvious that was announced then shortly after that he died. But I was so upset and I couldn't sleep. I was wired. I was texting you. I was texting other people. And then our kids are really, really, really good sleepers. Very rarely wake up. Any one of them. The first one woke up. The 8-year-old woke up at about 1 o'clock in the morning. He came into the bed. The 6-year-old woke up at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He came into the bed. The 3-year-olds came into the bed at 4. Like, this has never happened before. They were all having bad dreams. They were all distressed. They weren't awake when I heard the news, so there was something that couldn't have affected them in anything that I did. But it was just a really weird, horrible night of sleep, and I was just really, I still am. I'm
you sent me a screenshot. You sent me a screenshot of your sleep app this morning, and it wasn't. You didn't get a lot.
No,
it's funny you say I'm rarely shaken by news. I'm rarely genuinely upset by it. I mean, you couldn't do this job that I do and be really upset and shaken by news. But there was something about that period. So obviously, I saw the footage around about the time you did. The internet is what it is these days. These things are around the world in seconds, right? So I don't know how long it was between the shooting happening and me seeing the video of it. But there was this horrible sort of 2-hour period where, if you saw the film, you knew Charlie Kirk was dead. Right? You saw the film and you knew anything at all about ballistics and firearms. You knew he was dead. It was kind of like the Zapruder film of the JFK assassination, fortunately, which if anyone has ever seen, I mean, that was unsurvivable, and what happened to Charlie Kirk was unsurvivable. And so you just sit through this kind of conversation of kind of watching people online kind of going, is he alive, is he dead, and all the rest of it, and try and process it. And you knew the inevitable news was coming. And that period of time was just filled in on the news broadcast I was watching, which was CNN from the US, with just pictures of his wife and 2 young children. And I posted a tweet, I think it was within 15 minutes of having seen it, where I said, I don't understand the level of hatred it takes to want to look at that his very attractive, not that it makes a difference, but his very attractive young wife and his 2 beautiful young daughters and say, I want to make that woman a widow and those 2 daughters, those 2 children, parentless, fatherless. I don't understand the level of hatred it takes. Because it's not, somebody in the comments will make some comments about Gaza or Ukraine or wars. And yes, horrible things happen all the time, right? But those are generalized. This is an attack on a specific individual family. And you've deliberately made 2 young children an orphan and a young wife a widow because you didn't like what the guy said. I will.
I also find, there was quite a bit of that online last night, that sort of whataboutery, what about this person and what about that, and this is worse and that is worse, and it's kind of garbage. It's the sort of, it's the point made by stupid people. Of course other people have died. Of course more people have died in this and more people have died at that. Like I always know someone is thick if they start that kind of thing. Because in the middle, and you're talking about in the middle of a tragedy, in the middle of, when people are waiting to see if he's survived, or in the immediate aftermath of his dying, just stupid people with whataboutery about, other people have died by guns. Okay, what's your point? Like, do you know what I mean? It's just so, I don't know, just stupid people say stuff like that in those kind of moments. And I don't know why. I mean, a 31-year-old man who goes to college campuses and debates with young people who are largely, in a huge amount of cases captured by a mind virus, and gives them time and gives them respect and debates with them, why he is the subject, or deemed to be so hateable that he deserves to be killed, is something that nobody can understand except all the people who think it's great news. And by the way, there's loads of them.
Yeah, there are. I mean, look, this felt very personal to me. I mean, it's funny. I'm not a Charlie Kirk fan, or I wasn't a Charlie Kirk fan, and I don't mean that. I don't say that. I didn't dislike the guy. It's just that he was never, I suppose, I was never his target audience, right? So he's out there, he's persuading young people of the merits of conservatism and
Yeah.
the political right. I'm not his target audience. I was sold on that years ago. He's 10 years younger than me. He's out persuading young people of something that I already believe in. Good for him, no ill will towards him. Had seen many references to him over the years, had seen him once or twice, but I was never a Charlie Kirk fan. I was aware of who he was, what he was doing, admired his organizational skill. Turning Point USA is an enormously successful organization and kind of a model for youth activism the world over that was even envied by his political opponents. But it felt very personal to me because I like an argument. This is ultimately my problem. I sometimes end up on the wrong side of the readers or the listeners of this podcast because I like an argument. Sometimes you and I will have an argument because I like to have an argument. And I think arguing is the only way that ideas can be tested, where you bring your best ideas and I interrogate them, and I bring my best ideas and you interrogate them, and an audience listening can decide which idea they think is stronger. And that's what he was doing. He was doing politics the way it is supposed to be done. He was going into a very hostile environment, college campuses, which for the entirety of modern history have been the preserve of the political left. You don't expect a warm reception there when you're a conservative. I mean, God knows I very occasionally do it. I think I'm going to the Law Society in UCD in October, for example, to do a debate. I fully expect to lose, but you go in and you talk to the young people and you try and give them your perspective, and you try and persuade them with arguments, and they try and tell you that they're wrong with arguments, and it's peaceful and it's civilized. He was doing it the right way, and he had a sign up behind him which said, "Prove me wrong. Like, come up and challenge me and tell me why I'm wrong." And somebody decided that the only way that they could prove him wrong was a bullet through the neck. And it therefore feels like an attack. And I think it is an attack, not only on him, not only on the political right, but it's an attack on everybody who tries to do politics the right way. And as you say, a lot of people are cheering it. And I've seen opinion polls of young people in the United States over the last couple of years, and indeed in the West, where disturbing majorities of them are now saying violence is an acceptable way to resolve a political dispute. It really feels like, take the ideology out of it. We'll come back to the ideology in a little while because I have a lot to say about the political left. But in general, it feels like we're heading in towards a really, really bad place.
And these are people who, for the most part, and I'm really sick of this as well. Words are violence. Words aren't violence. Violence is violence. Words are not violence. Your feelings are not hurt, or being hurt are not violence. Someone disagreeing with you is not violence. And there's, I don't know, something dark. I mean, there's been a polarization in politics or whatever, but I think that this has been really telling for me in the way that people are accepted cheering it, saying that it's fine because he was pro guns, that live by the gun, die by the gun. People I know in Labour, that's their attitude. Just this kind of flippant kind of attitude that, and I think it's really dark. And I think that people I know, be they in their Labour Party or be they just friends or whatever, and they think they're the good side. They think they're the goodies. You're the baddies. You're the baddie. You're the bad side. You're the wrong people. You are like demonic if you are online putting up videos of yourself laughing or celebrating the death of a 31-year-old father of two. You are demonic, in my opinion. There's something deeply, deeply wrong with you. I would say you need to take a long, hard look at the mirror, but I think if you're that far gone, you're irredeemably messed up and you will never be right. But I think that there's something about this that, yes, it feels personal, but it feels really scary because the left have always been the be kind and the this and that, and this just shows me that they hate people who don't agree with them. They dehumanize people who don't agree with them, and I don't think that conservative right people, for all the problems that might be within the conservative movement and people who are on the right, I don't think they do that.
But I think you have to. I wrote a piece about this after it happened, a couple of hours after it happened, and I wrote it in a state of a lot of anger. But the anger hasn't subsided. This doesn't start with the guy taking a sniper rifle. This starts with the idea that you can't say certain things. It starts with the idea that it's legitimate to shut people up by non-violent means. So you start with kind of political correctness and the kind of general sense that's inculcated in the population that you can't say certain words, or you can't say certain things. It's well-intentioned. I'm not saying it's not well-intentioned. And then it moves on to policing speech and, cancel culture, and people can be stacked or people can be deplatformed, or you can have student protests saying that this person shall not speak at this university. And then it moves on to hate speech. And then it moves on to all sorts of regulatory hurdles and, preventing people from getting certain jobs or appearing on certain television programs because they have the wrong views. And eventually, if all that doesn't work, if they can't shut you up by non-violent means, the bullet is just the logical extension. It's the logical extension of what is an explicitly left-wing culture of shutting up your opponents. And you can see it happening in Ireland. Because, and this is what bugs me. It's not actually the far left. I saw Conor Reddy, the People Before Profit councillor, doing his laughy, smiley face emojis. And so kind of like, this is very funny that this happened to Charlie Kirk thing for attention because he's a baby. And that's what People Before Profit do. And they will never win an election. They will never be in power. They are a clown show. But it's not them I'm annoyed at. I'm more annoyed at the Ivana Bacic's of the world. Ivana Bacic is, very well known as a college debater par excellence. She went in and engaged with ideas, won arguments, won campaigns, and persuaded people to her side. She's an icon of sort of the student debating scene in Ireland. She hasn't got a word to say about somebody being shot dead for expressing an idea. She's too much of a coward to say a word about it because she's afraid. Who's she afraid of? She's afraid of the left. And when you ask in this country, who are the people who are afraid to say things? It's not people who are afraid of them. Nobody doesn't say anything in this country because they're afraid of the right wing, right? No one doesn't say anything. There's nobody in this country who's like, oh, I can't say that. The far right might get me. No, but there are a lot of people in this country who don't say things because they're fucking terrified of the left wingers.
They don't want to say things in work. They don't want to say things at family things. Like, I mean, well, we'll come back to that because I think that like there's more to discuss there. But yeah, the Ivana Bacic's, I think Ivana Bacic and the Labour Party are clown shows. Although, I mean, People Before Profit they're two cheeks of the same arse. They're just lefty nonsense. I mean, Aon is still, like Aon did an article. Came up my feed recently, where he's crying and whinging about how they call it. He's still giant man child is still upset about the fact that people called him Adon or Queerdon when he was in school. But, you know,
Gay don't know, queer don't.
whatever. I mean, you're an adult. Move on. But nothing to say about somebody being shot in the neck at a college campus. I mean, it's just,
He did a
you know,
protest the other day. He did a protest at the Hungary Ireland match the other day. Do you know that?
yeah, no, I saw there was about 12 people. I saw a photo of it. It was about 12 people at it.
Viktor Orban was not welcome in Ireland. But I mean, and that's what I'm talking about, though. It's an extension of that. You are not welcome here. You know, your views aren't welcome. Well, the thing is, what these people can't say is where does that end? Because what if they come here anyway? What if they say the thing anyway? What if they continue to hold the views? What, God forbid, if they start winning the argument? What if they start persuading people? Well,
but the thing is, John, the thing is that, like, it's not about it also just comes down to basic stuff, right? So, you know, your man, the dude who dresses up as a woman and goes to restaurants and then gets really upset when the waitress misgenders him and he films the whole thing. You know, the butch dude with the long hair.
It could be one of 5, but I assume
Anyway,
I do.
there's a dude who wears woman face and then gets upset when people don't use the right pronouns. Anyway, the point is, I think he is, and everything he stands for is a hugely problematic for society. And I disagree with absolutely everything he thinks. And I think he's a deeply unpleasant, rude, ignorant person who's wrong about probably everything, every view he has. If there was a video tomorrow of him being shot in the neck, I would be absolutely horrified. I would be horrified. Somebody's child, somebody's brother, somebody's friend, part of a community somewhere, he's a nephew, whatever. It's the I don't think it's just the flippant, like the European Parliament today, the lefty MEPs, they won't honour a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk. Like, what is wrong with you? I don't agree with Hillary Clinton's politics or loads of people on the left. If one of them got shot, I'd be appalled. And I certainly would stand for a moment of silence of somebody who got shot in the neck and died, who was 31, for giving speeches on college campuses about, you know, challenging young people about their ideas. I mean, they're so poisoned and so done. That's what I mean. Like, it's dark. I think you are on the wrong side. You are a bad person.
But that's it. And I would ask anybody watching or listening to this podcast, just ask yourself the following question. Who is it that you are afraid of offending? When you think of the opinions that you have that maybe you don't say out loud, who is it in Irish society or American society or British society that you're afraid might react angrily to you? I think you will find it is not the political right. I think you will find it is the political left. And I think you will find you're terrified of their reaction. I think you will find that when you fear for your job, you don't fear for it because it's the political right who might take your job away. You fear for it because it is the left-wingers and the wokesters. You don't fear that you might be arrested by the political right-wingers for expressing a controversial view. You do fear you might cross, if you're in the UK, hate speech laws, which are overwhelmingly enforced in one direction. I think you will find that if you're afraid that you might be violently attacked on the street for your opinion, I think you'll find in most cases you'll be more afraid of Antifa, or as they call themselves, or the Irish anti-imperialist movement, or whoever it might be who decides to, whack you on the street or hassle you in a protest. And who do you think might shoot you? Well, the Wall Street Journal reports this evening. The Wall Street Journal reports something I tend to take seriously. There's a fair chance they're onto something, that the bullets that killed Charlie Kirk were inscribed with transgender and anti-fascist slogans, which I think is the only insight into the motive for this event that we have. I think it speaks for itself. Who are you more afraid of? And by the way, who runs this country?
And I don't know. I think, the reason why I didn't get any sleep last night and the reason why I think it affected people so badly, and so many people I know got in touch with me and were just like really horrified. And somebody actually in particular tonight was saying that she was messaging me, a friend of mine was messaging me, she said she put up on Instagram a picture of Charlie Kirk and some RIP or whatever. And she screenshotted, she sent it to me, a barrage of abuse from a person she's known all her life about how they're unfollowing her, that, he was this and he was that. And it was just RIP to a 31-year-old Christian man, father of 2 children, who got shot in the neck. And that's problematic. And I just think that somewhere along the line, we used to laugh about, and I mentioned it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and Ricky Gervais does a really good thing about, like, the absolute arrogance of people to think that they deserve to go through their life without ever being offended. And somewhere in there, they've kind of become emboldened. They don't even want the sight of the 31-year-old who got shot in the neck. That offends them, because he's a baddie and they're the goodies. They've really lost their minds, but they also, they're very powerful, and they think, I see things on Instagram all the time. I've lots of friends on Instagram, they put things up I don't agree with. I never comment, because, like, I don't, people are entitled to their opinion, and I don't really get involved with DMing people being like, why are you putting this up? I don't agree with you. Because also I think that person is entitled to their opinion, and I'm not sure that they really care what mine is, and I don't need to offer it in those every moment. But some of these people are just so emboldened. They think their opinion is the most important thing. They think they're on the right side of everything, and they just are triggered and offended by alternate views or whatever. And even the picture of a man who's just been shot. It's just...
Do you know, it's interesting you say that, coming back to the theme of fear. So a couple of months ago, I'm on Instagram. I don't really post on Instagram, but I'm on Instagram because I'm nosy, and I like to see what other people are doing on Instagram. And, like, I follow loads of my friends on Instagram, and also just because I like to browse through the reels, see what's in the culture. But there is this particular person who I don't think listens to this podcast, who I've known for many, many, many years, and she's big on the Palestine stuff. Right, she's big on the Palestine stuff. And there was one morning, a couple of months ago, over the summer, when the weather was very nice, and she had this reel up, and it was kind of like, it was her, and it was like 3 other kind of very hippy drippy women, and they were doing, it was kind of like, there was music, it was a kind of like, soothing kind of morning-y music, and they were doing the yoga in their pants, and it was like morning yoga on the beach for Palestine, and they all had a little Palestine flag. And I remember thinking, I could say something really...
Don't do it.
No, don't do it, because if those people, if you challenge them, there is going to be a meltdown. They are not capable of...
But this is the point I'm trying to make. If you put up something about Charlie Kirk, I bet you that person would feel very confident and very, very self-righteous in schooling you on what a bad guy he was, and a load of whataboutery about why, he's dead, and, it's not the worst thing ever because he was pro-guns, or whatever hot take this dum-dum has on it. Why do they feel confident to do that to you, but you wouldn't be arsed doing that to them? What happened there? Explain the phenomenon, because I know exactly what you mean. I would never bother commenting on other people, and I don't put up political stuff on Instagram, partially because I know if I do, I'll have people, and there's people who follow my Instagram that I like, and I don't want them to kind of disappoint me, so I just don't. But what is the phenomenon, what we've just described there? Why do they feel confident and self-righteous to school you, but you wouldn't be bothered?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I don't think anyone has ever come up to me and offered a political opinion that's offended me. I'm always interested. Like, why do you believe that? Like, what's your... I disagree with you. Why do you believe that? Well, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, it's echo chambers, right? So in Ireland, you don't really hear any other opinions, and we live in a social media era. And I was talking about the Niall Boylan show on Thursday morning about this. We all silo ourselves away so much that you don't really have to hear a contrary opinion. One of the things that always strikes me, if I can answer it this way, is when on my rare occasions nowadays, when I go on television or I go on radio to debate somebody from sort of the liberal side, the mainstream side of Irish politics, and people say to me afterwards, "Oh, you did really well there. They weren't prepared for what you said," and I often find that's the case, and I don't actually think it's because I'm particularly good. I think it is because so often you will go on to Virgin Media's Tonight Show, or you'll go on to Breakfast on News Talk, or whatever show it is, and you'll be up against somebody who literally has never encountered your arguments before. Literally never heard them. Like they just they've only heard is that the right wing position is bad, it is bad, and there's some caricature of it. So, for example, if it's about poverty, it'll be like, oh, the right wingers, they want kids to be poor. And they've never actually heard the
I want to
argument, so they
murder
can't deal with
homeless
it.
people. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they can't deal with it, and so they sit there kind of sometimes gaping like fish, and it's like shooting fish in the barrel. It's not because you've made some massively insightful argument; it's just because you've literally made an argument they've never heard before. Whereas you and I, and people listening to this podcast, if you live in Ireland, you've heard every liberal argument there is to make on basically everything. So if you're somebody who views politics through a primarily emotional sphere, which tends to make you more left wing in the first place, and you've never really heard the initial the opposition argument, the idea that anyone can disagree with you can be a very traumatic experience and can literally make you angry and rageful. And these people who we're describing, the kind of, and they're always the same kind of people. I don't want to be sexist, but they tend primarily to be women, and they tend primarily to. I'm sorry, I see you look at your face. They do, in my experience, and they tend to react very emotionally to somebody who disagrees with them, and they are the same people, who just say the most awful things. Today I saw on TikTok, somebody put up a video of Charlie Kirk. I think a lot of people have seen it probably at this stage. It's one where he was in Fox News and he was just finishing up and his little daughter is running towards him going, "Daddy, Daddy," and jumps into her arms. It's absolutely beautiful. And the person who posted on TikTok had posted kind of like, "This is heartbreaking." And some woman underneath it, some American woman, I judged by her profile, she was college age or younger, had posted underneath it. Now, I wouldn't be highlighting this, by the way, without the context that comes thereafter. Had posted, yeah, but at least that daughter will grow up with one less man saying she can't get an abortion, meaning Charlie Kirk, or words to that effect. Now, you might write that off as the ramblings of a troll. That comment had well over 1,000 likes from other people who thought that was an appropriate thing to post on a video of a young girl who just lost her dad. And these people think they're kind. Something has gone really badly wrong.
I saw a lot of really nasty, toxic stuff like that and celebration and whatever. And again, I think it's the only time I've ever used this word, demonic, on this podcast. And then I just saw a lot of, like I said earlier on, this kind of stupid whataboutery on Instagram or TikTok, Twitter, X, whatever. And just these like, and I'm sorry, but like, I saw a lot of them from women, as you say, just these really stupid. I kind of have this real allergy to, this compulsion to say, well, what about this? There's always something else. There's always something worse. The example I always use of this is my mother. So I grew up with one set of grandparents because my mother lost her mother when she was 10. And then in what you can imagine is the stuff of nightmares. So her mother died of cancer when she was 10. And then in this, what is only the stuff of nightmares for a 12-year-old who's lost her mother, is that her father suddenly had a heart attack and died. So my mum had no parents by the time she was 12. And I have discussed with my mum that my mum obviously had this massive tragedy in her childhood and was raised by her older brothers and sisters, luckily. But she doesn't go to funerals of people whose fathers died and go, well, isn't it well for you to still have a mother? My mother and father died. Like there's always something worse. There's this kind of whataboutery. It's such kind of nonsense. Like, and I saw all this stuff on Twitter and I was so upset last night. Then I started talking to stupid people on Twitter. And then I just decided to kind of stop because I was like, these thickos aren't worth the time. But it's like, well, what about this? And what about the school shit? Yeah. Was anyone pro school shootings? Did I miss? Was somebody up for that? And why can't you just? It's like anything but focus on the fact you can't. You are so removed from your own humanity and the humanity of others that you can't just say, "Oh my God, a young man has been shot. His children have lost their father. His wife has lost her husband." And this is wrong and horrifying and should be condemned.
You say that, but there was a school shooting in America about 2 weeks ago. Maybe it was 1 week ago. Unfortunately, these events keep happening with such regularity. And for the record, I think American gun laws are nuts. Just throw it out there. I think American gun laws, I'm a right winger, doesn't have to defend everything. The American gun laws are nuts. But there was a school shooting in America a couple of weeks ago, carried out by a young transgendered person, who was very clearly very mentally disturbed and killed a number of young people. And there was a significant body of online left-wing opinion that was more concerned with the demonization of the victim, of the perpetrator, than they were for the lives of the victims. And that was immediately obvious. That their sympathy immediately went to the culture war thing of let's tamp down the blame being associated here on the transgender person. But by the way, nobody rational would say that one transgender person committing a crime means all transgender people are child killers. Like, that's not a thing a rational person would say. But if you become so enmeshed in this constant me and them and us philosophy of life that your entire identity is defending the minority group, so it doesn't matter what the minority group do, somebody else must be to blame. It's so utterly toxic, and it is. I don't want to become that cliche of kind of like the person growing older and starting to blame everything on the youth, but it seems to me to be a toxicity that is highly concentrated amongst recent graduates of the education system, and I do not think it is a coincidence that has followed the 10 or 12 years since a lot of universities in the West have basically abandoned any pretense of being anything other than factories for woke indoctrination, which is what many of them are. And I think the young people coming out of these universities are. Go ahead.
But that's why this is so profoundly upsetting, because there is people on the right, we'll say, who accept what you've just said there, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, but who accept that as a fait accompli, and Charlie Kirk didn't. Charlie Kirk went to campuses and was fighting a battle to try and win some of those minds over. That's why this feels so much worse, because I think a lot of universities, and it's the same in Ireland, and we've talked ad nauseum on this podcast about, somebody somewhere studying, the vagina monologues on ice through in space. Do you know what I mean? Like just garbage art installations of nonsense, just breeding grounds for stupidity and nonsense. And nobody that I know of, apart from Charlie Kirk, really made a point of trying really hard to engage with those people and taking the abuse and going and he's speaking in Utah at the event he died. I saw that there was 6,000 signatories that he shouldn't be allowed on the campus. Like doing that work, going to those places, engaging with those people, and having often childish, often abusive conversations with people who, stick their fingers in their ear and go la 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 when somebody, speaks violence to them. But he was doing the work. That's why he was so amazing, I think. And that's not to agree with everything he said, but like that's why this feels personal. That's why this is so depressing. He's not a politician. He's a conservative mind who was trying to engage with a group of people that a lot of us think are lost.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're all lost, but I think a good proportion of them are, and I think there's a whole. The thing is, you look at that generation; they are so fucking unhappy. They are drinking less, they're doing fewer drugs, they're having a whole lot less sex, they are dating much later, they're not getting married, they report wholly negative views of the opposite sex in many cases. They have mental health issues that are through the roof. I think 20% of American women between the ages of 16 and 24 identify as LGBT in some form, which is it's off the charts high. The rates of diagnosed mental illness amongst young people. I mean, what I would say to my liberal friends, and I know a lot of you wash your hands off this and kind of go, oh, we're not really into this. The fruits of liberalism in the education of young people, what have you produced since you? I mean, I think we can broadly agree, can't we, that the dominant ideology in Western education has been progressivism since about the year 2000, and over the last 20 years, look at the generation of young people that your policies have produced. They don't like each other. They don't like you. They don't like their own lives. They are mentally challenged.
Weak.
Weak. what are you doing? Because I know there are. I mean, obviously there are some people out there. There are some people like in the
Yeah.
women's studies departments who think this is all great, but there are a lot of well-meaning, normal, centre, middle of the road, liberal people who didn't sign up for this, and surely must be noticing it and getting a little bit uncomfortable. No.
Yeah. But they will probably, but they'll never admit it. I
It's
mean, like, and they'll never admit it, and it suits people to keep this going because it's provide all this kind of garbage about, feeling whatever reinforcement people who have never been challenged on their views. As you point out, there's people who go from college then into an NGO and a job, and you're talking about going on to debate shows, whatever, but they'll never even meet anyone who has a different view. Because even the percentage of people who they're around who do have the different view wouldn't dare to dream to voice it because they'll start screaming and crying. So
well, there's a Free Press article last week in the Free Press, which is Barry Weiss's publication, which I subscribe to. And if you've got free money to spend on something other than Gript Media, I recommend for an insight into American culture. But there's a piece in it by a woman who was talking about dating in Washington D.C. and New York, and basically saying that women en masse are filtering for political ideology now, so they're not getting any dates because they're basically saying, if you are, I don't want anyone who isn't progressive. That's
oh my God.
and it's I don't want to lay it all on the young men.
I can only speak from my own experience. I can only speak from my own experience. But if some of those young girls are listening to this podcast, I highly recommend you get yourself a good right-winger girls. Much better husbands. Sorry, not sorry.
I don't know if my wife would agree, but I appreciate the endorsement for both your own beloved husband and indeed me by extension.
No, but I mean, but the thing is, John, that if I was single, right, and we'll call me a right winger, conservative, whatever. I would go. This is the thing. Like, I would go on a date with a guy who was left leaning. Why would I care? Might have great arguments. Might learn something. I don't know. Whatever. I wouldn't filter political ideology out. That is crazy, and that is a symptom of what we're talking about. You have dehumanized people who disagree with you so much that you can't be in the room with them, you can't date them, you can't work with them, and you don't care if they die.
No, I married a woman whose politics would always have been described as very liberal. And I always found when I was dating, before me, the very few women I dated before my wife, that I always got on really well with left-leaning women in particular, because I think I enjoyed arguing with them and they enjoyed arguing with me. I mean, weren't with me for my looks, right? So it must have been something like that. But today that can't happen. Today they're just writing each other off for not having the correct values.
Yeah. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's seeing TikToks of young people celebrating someone dying. It's really, really dark.
Thing is, then you flip the TikTok down, and they're crying about somebody else dying. They're crying about the terrible thing that's happening elsewhere in the world. They've been told to performatively care about, whether it be Ukraine, whether it be Gaza, whether it be climate change, whatever. I mean, and then somebody actually gets shot in cold blood, and they're like, that's funny. There's something else happening here as well, I think, which is the kind of computerization of the discourse. A tweet I saw during the last 12 hours or so, which really struck home with me, and it crystallized kind of something that I've been thinking myself for a while, is that one of the things I really don't like about this is the fact that for the rest of eternity, if you are so minded, you can go on the internet and look at the moment the bullet hit Charlie Kirk.
I know.
And the reason I don't like it is because I think it is desensitizing. I think it is pornographic. I think it's the same. I don't want to do a segue into the Irina Zurutska case, but I think where you also have a video of a young woman who's just suffered a fatal knife wound. And if you want, you can watch the last few minutes of her life on camera, on a loop. And the internet is full of, and when I talk about the problems with the young women, I mean, there's a culture on the internet of young men who, a lot of them are gorging on these videos of really terrible things happening, and combined with like, extreme pornography that is turning a lot of young men into really, really, really unpleasant, cold individuals. I think there's something really bad about it. I think it creates a computer gamization of society, and I'm really uncomfortable with what. I'm not a religious person particularly, but I really think videos like that are very bad for the soul, and I think there is a real case. If there's ever a case for censorship of anything, there's a case for the censorship of footage of people in their last moments,
Yeah,
or
I mean, I
just even
think
fatal ones.
the Irina Zaritska thing, I was going out of my way to try and not see it, and then you know the way sometimes you're just scrolling along, and then all of a sudden something on your feed is playing, and I realized that I kind of seen it, and that's the other thing. Like this week, I was saying to you, I feel that really, very unintentionally, I've seen 2 people die in a week online, and it's deeply traumatic. And both of them, I don't know, it's just something weirdly symbolic about the fact that both of them in the neck, like, you know, kind of, I don't know, just really violent, gory deaths. And I wish I hadn't seen them, but I did. And I don't, I totally agree with you. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it definitely, n- n- certainly not for me, but it definitely dilutes it, or it makes people, normalizes the level of violence that's just,
I think that's the scary thing. There's no answer to it, is there? There's no.
no,
The internet is a global thing. You're not putting that genie back in the bottle.
no.
There's no government or authority on earth that can take those videos off the internet, up them away, and say you can't see them. They will
But the
always be a
only
waste
thing,
of
but so then, but then the only thing you can do is to try and humanize the people as much as you can, and that's the battle. Really, the battle is in humanizing people, rehumanizing people like Charlie Kirk, to young people, or to people on the left who think that he's not human, or that he deserves that. Do you know what I mean? Because the video is going to be there. That's going to happen. Everything is on camera. Everything that happens is filmed, by multiple people. So you have to try and make people reject it because the person is a human being. That's the only thing you can do. And I don't know what the answer to that is either.
No, I don't know, but
But
it's what frightens me more than anything else is the dehumanization of each other. Because like
mm,
it's there in the violence, it's there in the pornography, which kind of turns women into just a collection of body parts, and I guess men too, if you're into that kind of thing. It's there in the violence. It's there in the kind of the culture we have now, where we are in kind of tribes of enemies and friends, and people on the other side are dehumanized. I don't know how you fix this, but I know not enough people are having the conversation. And like I look at this country of ours, because this is all happening in the United States, and obviously the United States is a global cultural reach. But I look at this country of ours, and I am so depressed by it. I am so depressed by these people. Now, in fairness, I will say this: Nihal Martin and Simon Harris came out and were very strong in their condemnation of what happened to Charlie Kirk. I don't deny that. Then I look at those scumbag fuckers in radio, television, area, and the story they put out, which all but justified the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And then the Irish Times, which in its wisdom ran an opinion piece, which just slandered him. If you read my email to the subscribers to Marvel Kirk, it slandered him so, not even in a. There's a line in it where they say, Charlie Kirk, he was part of a cadre of young influencers, including Milo Yiannopoulos, and I think he mentioned somebody else. Oh yeah, Nick Fuentes, who, unlike them, he didn't stray into naked homophobia and racism. But it was a way in which the article was trying to link him by mentioning two other people to homophobia and racism. It was disgusting.
yeah,
And why are you publishing that? There used to be a rule. Which we all broadly observe, which is that you don't speak ill of the dead. That you find something nice to say about somebody after they've died, even if you're really, really opposed them. And I have to say, I've always tried to live by that. And if there's nothing nice that I can say if somebody's dead, I just say nothing.
yeah.
But
And
like,
people should be made aware that that's also an option.
that is also an option. You don't have to say anything. But like the Irish media, which goes out of its way. And then there was this segment. I don't want to go hard on the gentleman in question because he's a decent reporter, but there was a section on Virgin Media's Tonight Show where they were like, "Can you talk about this thing that's just happened?" And it was analysed as if, like, it's like, "Oh, well, this will cause big waves in MAGA world." He was a big MAGA conservative, and not one of these people who are all engaged in political debate had the gumption to say, "This is absolutely terrible." Not one of them. Not the presenter, not the guest. They just sat there and analysed it like it was something that happened in a zoo somewhere. Like, the lack of empathy is extraordinary.
Scary. It's scary.
And it came after, like, sorry, I'm serious at this point. Like, last week, the British Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, resigned, right? She's obviously a woman of the left, working class girl, done good, got in trouble with tax, got nobbled. And both RTE and the Irish Times basically ran hagiographies of this woman as if she was dead. It was like she started in the gutter and she worked her way up, came out of the mines, and then she rose to the top before, like, just some bad luck brought her down. The overtness of the political bias in the media, and their eagerness to make everything into a culture war is just. And then they had the nerve turn around to me in Gript and say, "Oh, you guys are very partisan."
I know, yeah.
F you.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, is there anything else you want to say about this? Because we talked about it for 46 minutes, and I want to give you a presidential election bit of a.
No, I suppose, I think that Charlie Kirk is somebody who has like made a huge impact, and I think if people who follow this podcast will often say to me, or you, "Oh, I love the podcast, and I can't, you say the things I want to say, or you say the things I can't say, or whatever." And I think, like, I feel very down and very put out by this and really shook, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen to it do as well. But Charlie Kirk was always saying that it was always quoting Aristotle, saying that courage is the ultimate virtue, and without it there are no others. And I think that people who listen to this podcast and who feel like they can't speak up should think about courage this week, and maybe in the spirit of Charlie Kirk, speak up once to honour the memory of a man of faith who's been shot in the neck, who did some really good work and deserves, a bit of bravery from people. If you're at work and they're all talking about it and somebody says something horrible about it, have the courage to say something. Or if you're at a family event and your, mean auntie who bullies everybody into thinking the way she does says something, have the courage to say something. And if somebody sends you a message on Instagram because you put up something, have the courage to fight back against them, because that's
recognise
the only thing.
Recognise the tactics that these hysterical people use. But question one will be, how could you believe that? How? That's the first thing they always say.
So you're saying, you're in favor of shooting children, are you? Yeah.
To which you say, no, I'm not in favor of shooting children. But are you a fucking moron? I won't even say.
I know.
But, like, you just have to stand up to them.
Auntie Mary, are you a complete niff-nuff? Are you serious?
It is.
We'll be causing family rifts all over Ireland.
Yeah, but that's the first thing. How could you believe that? And then of course the one that Jordan Peterson exposed with Kathy, what's her name, all those years ago, which is so what you're saying is that one. That one gets thrown at you as well. And no, you just say, actually, I have a brain. I thought about it. I read, and I came to this conclusion. And if you don't like it, well, you've got your own opinion. You don't get to have mine as well. Bye. Yeah. Like that's.
And he died. He was shot, isn't it? Well, isn't it well for him, because there was a woman and a man shot last week. Okay, great, useful.
Yeah. I mean,
there are a lot of dum-dums, John. There are a lot of dum-dums, and this is the thing that people like Charlie Kirk, what you're talking about when you go on to TV shows or whatever. If you're on the other side of this, like you are, or whatever, you hone your skill, you think about your opinions, you change them, you get stronger in your position on some things, whatever, because it's constantly being challenged and tested. And these ticks never have anybody who stands up to them. So they have the depth of most of their arguments are like zero.
Yeah. And then the thing is as well, comes down to really important why I believe in debate. Charlie Kirk believed in debate. He went on and he engaged with these people and he argued with them and he persuaded them. And the reason he was good at it was because he was unafraid to expose his views to scrutiny. He wasn't hiding behind, a Twitter block list, or he wasn't refusing to associate or go on dates with people who disagreed with him. He was willing to have his views challenged, and that is something. The one thing I always say to people who read Gript, is do not only read Gript. If you're only reading what I write, then you're not getting the full picture. Because I'm giving you my honest opinion, but it's my honest opinion. If you are a conservative, if you really want to be a good conservative, read the very best and most persuasive liberal writers you can find. I've always said this, about Fintan O'Toole, who I often mock. I never miss one of his columns. Because every now and again, he will make a really good argument that I hadn't thought. And I would rather know what that argument is if I'm ever in a studio or in a position. I'd rather know it and understand it and have had the time to think about it. And also, there have been times when he's not the only liberal I read. There are many. Matthew Paris in the Times, for example, the Times of London is another great example of somebody who Matthew Paris has made the most honest argument for assisted dying I've ever read. When he basically said, "Look, save us money." And he made that argument completely seriously, and I say fair play to him for putting a good opinion out there. You've got to engage with people who you fundamentally disagree with, or indeed are sometimes morally abhorred by, to make yourself smarter. If you're only reading stuff you agree with, then you're not making yourself any smarter. You're just making yourself lazier, more comfortable.
Also, just one other thing about Charlie Kirk, because I wanted to say it. I noticed in the Irish commentary or whatever, very little comment on it. And I think it's just a point I want to make, that Charlie Kirk had amazing faith and was really led by his faith in everything that he did. And it was this grounding for him. And he was led by God and Jesus Christ and everything that he did. And I think that in Ireland there's real scorn for that kind of thing. And, people kind of ridicule it. And I obviously really have a huge issue with the way that the Irish general discourse treats people who have faith, or well, it depends on the faith, but Christian or Catholic faith. But I think that, the way people kind of skim over his faith and ignore it is another kind of thing, or the left are kind of uncomfortable with acknowledging that somebody had these deeply held views that were bigger than them, And I don't know, I think that in the spirit of what I was just saying there, that people should also have the courage to speak their own faith loudly if they feel they need to do so, because I think a lot of people in Ireland hide their faith now, because in Ireland it's not a very welcoming place to be Christian or Catholic, or to talk about your relationship with God. Nobody does. It's very rare. I mean, Katie Taylor, I remember being shocked when Katie Taylor came out and talked about her relationship with Jesus, and I was like, oh, fair play to her. I just wasn't expecting that. And it's very rare that people do it, and it's much more common in America. But there's a kind of a scorn on it in Ireland, and I think that people should push back against that.
I'll come a long way around to answering you, to making the point I'm going to make, because it requires some background. But you probably, if you were following this Charlie Kirk thing, you may have come across an article that the ridiculous American online publication Jezebel published about a week and a half ago, where they basically said, had somebody write a piece, go, I hired an Etsy witch to hex Charlie Kirk. Now, this is before he came shot. Right? It was just one of those ridiculously stupid articles that people write. And of course, then he gets shot to death. And then, of course, all the commenters in Jezebel, in the spirit of what we've been talking about, have been saying, oh, this is brilliant. Where can we get a witch? Anyway, long story short, somebody on Blue Sky today, which is sort of like the liberal Twitter, decided to tweet that they were going to hire an Etsy witch to put a hex on me, on yours truly. And I got a phone call from a very dear friend, I won't reveal who it was, who basically, urged me to pray and to say a particular prayer, which I have said, but I'm not particularly religious, and to go to mass and to embrace my faith. He said, because you might as well, because there's an awful lot of this stuff on the other side of the road. There's an awful lot of these people who genuinely believe in witchcraft and the occult. And I'm not talking about the majority here, but there's more of it around than you would think. And I've never really talked a lot in public about my religious views, because they're not that complicated. I hope there's a God. I genuinely hope there's a God. I'd like to meet him if there is. I just
You have some
not.
questions.
I have some questions, which I don't want to get into because I don't want to sound disrespectful. I put it this way: I admire faith in others, and I
Oh,
envy faith in others.
I
I envy it, but
Charlie Kirk's faith for me was massive envy.
it's good. It makes you happy. It makes you good. I guess the other thing is never been that good at obeying the rules. Right, and this is the thing. I would never want to be a hypocrite. And I was never that good at obeying a baptized Catholic. I'd never been that good at obeying the rules of the church. And it kind of feels to me to be a little bit cheap to be going to confession every other week to confess sins that you fully intend to keep committing. So there's that as well. But look, who knows? Who knows? But I agree with you. We don't talk about it enough. Look, we're nearly at the end of the show. Let's do something else. Maria Steen got big news just before we came on the air or started recording. She has won the backing of 10 TDs and senators. Is she now the only game in town to be an independent presidential nominee?
And the Oireachtas route, yes. The councils we'll get to the councils in a second. I think that's a mandate. I think it becomes more and more difficult for people. Independent Ireland are still holding it and saying that if somebody has 16, they'll offer the last 4, which is completely nonsensical fence sitting. But anyway, we are where we are. So that leaves 6. I think that there is potentially 6 votes there. I think it becomes more and more difficult. You mentioned Fintan O'Toole. Fintan O'Toole came out and wrote an article about how Maria Steen should be on the ticket in the interest of democracy. I think if you're a TD who's independent or a senator who's independent, I think it becomes less credible for you to not back an independent person and give the public the right to decide on that person. It becomes less and less credible the more she has. There was a caucus set up by Peadar Tóibín and Aontú. It was a good idea. The caucus selected Maria from other candidates who spoke to them. She now has that block of 10 votes. There's a path there. There is a path there to a nomination, and I don't think anybody else has a path.
Well, in the Oireachtas route,
Yeah.
she's taken 10 votes off the table that just ain't there for anyone else. So I mean, she's the only game in town. If I was her, I would be saying, maybe it's a bad idea for her to say it because she needs these people to endorse her. But I have heard it said by some of these independent TDs and senators in the Dáil that are backing the government that they don't want to alienate Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael by nominating a candidate against Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. But Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are alienating each other by running 2 separate candidates. And you were elected. You were there because of the votes of people like me, I've got to say, who voted independent or smaller party at the last election.
Yeah.
You were there. You were there because those people specifically did not choose a Fianna Fáil candidate, a Sinn Féin candidate, Fine Gael
They voted
candidate.
independent.
They voted independent, and now you are basically saying that they should be denied that opportunity. You're going to deny your own voters the opportunity to vote for an independent, whether it's Maria Steen or anyone else. But in this case, I think Maria Steen's the only game in town in the general election. I mean, and some of those people, by the way, I want to say this. Are people who get a lot of votes from people who listen to this podcast and people who watch Gript and consume our content. I mean, I know if you're a Healy Ray voter down in Kerry, there's a far greater chance that you are a Gript reader than if you are a Nirvana Batch voter in Ranelagh. Like this is the reality. And I would say to those people, if you were listening to this podcast and you voted for one of those, I mean, talking about the likes of Noel Grealish, Sean Canny, Kevin Boxer Moran, the Healy Rays, whomever, and you voted for some of those people as an independent, and you want an independent voice in the presidential election, I would be sending them an email going, why are you blocking an independent from the ticket? I voted for you because I like independence.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents.
I think that's very reasonable. But also, you're not being asked to make Maria Steen the president. You're being asked to allow the voters to decide.
Well, that is true. I'm just concerned that people might think this is the Maria Steen fan club. It's not. That is also true of county councillors if they're thinking about Gareth Sheridan or Nick Delante or indeed any of the other 14 people who are apparently out speaking at Dublin City Council on Monday next.
14.
Yeah, well, Dolores Cahill is one of them. Conor McGregor is going to speak to Dublin City Council, which I imagine will garner a lot of press attention. Yeah, there's a cast of guys.
Can you watch that online? I wouldn't mind watching that.
This is what Sarah does for her entertainment, folks. The rest of us sit down and watch
Nerd
The
alert.
Traitors or
Watching
Love Island or something. Sarah watches county council meetings.
No, I'd be curious to see what some of them are saying. Wouldn't you not?
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, the county councils are a completely different route. But in the Oireachtas, it's not that it's the Maria show. The Oireachtas is that if you have the block of 10 votes, it's not enough votes for anybody else. So that's the only route for Maria. And then in terms of the council, well, that's a completely separate thing. So, but, it could, there's a pathway there. There's a path there. And I think that, as I've said before, a ticket for the presidency that has Catherine Connolly, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil on it is really boring, not good for democracy, not good for the quality of the debate. And I think Maria Steen in there makes this an interesting election and will force the other three to talk about things that they will conspire together to not talk about if she's not there.
I'll say this much. I think that if you... And I understand that Gareth Sheridan has, or his campaign believes he has, a strong path to the 4 councils, and his campaign believes that they will be on the ticket. But I've seen no evidence of that yet. He hasn't had a council come out and back him yet. When he gets the first one, I'll take it a bit more seriously. But he believes that on the record. But for the moment, the candidate with the momentum towards the nomination is Maria Steen, because I think she's also still contesting the council path, and she has 10 TDs backing her. I imagine that number will grow by a couple at least in the next couple of days. That will give her some momentum into the councils as well, even if she doesn't get to the 20 in the Oireachtas. I think she's the one with the clearest path of all the independents seeking to get onto the ballot by any measure. She's the one with the clearest path. And I'm just thinking in my head that a presidential election comprising of Maria Steen, Jim Gavin, Heather Humphreys, and Catherine Connolly, I can see her doing pretty well in that election. I think there are a couple of things. I think first of all, she's an age contrast with the other 3 candidates. She's younger. She is, I hesitate to use the word fresher. She is probably the most fluent of the 4 of them as a public speaker. I think she looks presidential. I think she will sound presidential. I think there will be a lot of effort made to make her seem threatening. I think she is a very unthreatening person. Like I'm not saying she would win, but I think she would do a lot better in a 4-way race than people might think.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I also just think it mixes it changes the narrative of the whole election. It changes the topics that'll be discussed. It forces the other 3 to talk about things they're uncomfortable with. And it has an alternate view, because the reality of it is that on a number of key issues that we would talk about on this podcast quite regularly, the 3 candidates would all be in agreement.
Yep.
And that's not useful for anyone.
No, it's not. It's not. And she would. I think she says she would provide a real choice. Look, I would vote for her. I always believe that if you're reporting something, you should declare your bias. I would vote for Maria Steen. I would. So that's my position, publicly declared. Doesn't mean that I won't cover the campaign fairly or give what I think of the other candidates' chances. But that is my declaration. Anyway,
I don't think there's any concern about Catherine Connolly coming in for an interview with Gript, to be honest.
Yeah, I got in trouble because I called her St. Catherine of Aleppo during the week, but I just think it sticks. I mean, it's the holier than thou thing that bugs me about her. So, St. Catherine of Aleppo. That's who she is to me.
I also think, by the way, that I listened to an interview with her on RTE a couple of weeks ago. I think I messaged you about it at the time. Did I send you the link? Anyway, and she was really quite, no disrespect.
I've just called her St. Catherine of Aleppo. So
no overt disrespect intended, but she was quite poor. I mean, she was quite weak on some questions. She was a bit kind of cringe, a bit old school, not very good, to be honest. And obviously I'm biased and I don't agree with the majority of her positions on things, but I expected her, with the length of time she's been involved in politics and the suite of experiences that she's had at different political spaces, I expected her to be better. Jim Gavin is completely untested, and what I've seen so far, I think he's not a politician, and that could come a cropper for him quite quickly. And then Heather Humphreys, we were told, retired because she was too tired. So, I mean, now she wants
I
to
like
be
Heather Humphreys. I have to say, it's not just because I'm from Monaghan, and it's not just because you know I just like Heather Humphreys. I think she's a good, straightforward, no nonsense person. Uh, I'm going to say, and I think she will be a good campaigner, and I think she will bear the Fine Gael standard well for them. I would vote for Maria Steen ahead of Heather Humphreys, as I've said, but like,
Well, I mean,
I also think she's seasoned.
I would hope so, John.
I also think she's seasoned, but I think in terms of Jim Gavin, and I said this during the week, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier on. Remember, we had the conversation earlier in the podcast. Who are you afraid of? Who are you afraid of pissing off? Jim Gavin, to me, I saw him during the week several times. I was like, every answer to the question is the conveniently correct one. So he voted yes in the marriage referendum. He voted yes in the abortion referendum. He voted no in the two referendums last year. Every answer conveniently puts him on the side of the majority. I don't know. Maybe, presumably, he's telling the truth. I'm just knowing it. And I just, like, there was a nervousness to him every time the journalist asked him a question, like he's terrified of saying the wrong thing. And all of his answers are designed to put him like on the right side, not of the voters, but of the media. It's hilarious. And like it's like there's this acceptance that the media and the voters are the same thing when they're absolutely not. So like the journalists are there, and the first question they get to ask him is, "What was your stance on repeal?" As if the most important thing to even more than a fifth of the country in this campaign is how people voted in the 2018 referendum. But he was standing there. I just think it's so funny.
But that's why I think that he could unravel on the campaign. You think he might do quite well. No takesy backsies. That was your prediction. I think Billy Kelleher would have done better. We will see.
We will see. All right, look. It was a depressing start to the episode, but a long conversation with Sarah for an hour and 6 minutes has cheered me up. And if you've stuck with us, we are in 6 minutes. I hope it has cheered you up as well. There's a lot we didn't talk about this week, Sarah. We could have talked about the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council and the economics and the government spending and lots of or the CSO figures and immigration. There was lots of stuff we could have talked about, but I think in the circumstances, and I know how you and I, sometimes this is our podcast, right? You and I have a conversation with stuff that's bothering us. I think we were both really disturbed with what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I think a lot of listeners will have been as well, but it's been a bit of a therapy session. So thank you. Hopefully next week we'll bring better topics and more laughing. But thank you as ever for joining us. I've been John. She's been Sarah. This has been the week that really was, and we'll see you next week. Take care.